All right, so this is a planning committee meeting. It is Tuesday, May 14th. I'm just going to call this meeting to order, and the clerk can call the roll.
Councilmember Hotchkiss,
Present.
Councilmember Kavanaugh,
Present.
the third member of this committee, Councilmember Middleton, right?
My name is Costi.
No,
No?
it's not present. Councilmember Matavetsky is here in their ex officio capacity. And these are our two RL presenters.
So on to our first item is a request for legislation 24-96. This is an ordinance to amend the code of the city of Binghamton, chapter 410 zoning, article 7, section 41032G I-1 urban business park district to make social service permitted by right. This was submitted by President Matavetsky and Council Member Kavanaugh. So do you guys, which one of you wants to start?
Wait, I thought we were. Oh, okay. All right. Basically, it's an amendment to change the zoning that would make social services permitted by right in urban park, business park district. This is, I guess the kind of the context is, there is a building owned by ACDC, and it is in this type of zoning, urban business park district. And there are social services that they would like to offer.
So the zoning is prohibiting them from offering those services. And that's like, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the
Without a special permit.
without a special permit.
And they
And
tried to get a special permit before
right,
and didn't succeed. That was in August last year. I think this one kind of has a little bit of history, but the intention is to just give it another try to.
well, not just for them, anyone in the urban business park district.
Mhm.
It impacts the whole zoning.
But it's a very limited district.
It is a very limited district.
Urban business park area in the city.
Oh, I see.
So it's not like a residential district or many commercial districts that are all over the place. This is very limited.
So it's technically changed the entire zoning
Right.
district.
Okay.
So it's a code level change, so it's under city council's purview. But in actual fact, because it's relatively limited amount of this zone exists, it's will have a relatively small impact.
So outside of this is 15 Charles Street is like the no. Is that
Yep.
the,
Yep.
Is that the right address? That's the
That's ACDC.
that's been the catalyst for seeking this. But where else in the city would this potentially affect?
This new area, maybe.
Yeah, so the entire Charles Street Business Park is I-1. And that's the only I-1 in the city is the Charles Street Business Park. It's like 30-something acres. And this is the next RL, but we're proposing rezoning 2 Tichenor Place as I-1. The intent of I-1 is to have sort of an urban business park, so certain types of land uses like clean industrial, mixed use projects, things of that nature would be allowed there. So the original intent of Charles Street Business Park is reflected in the uses that are allowed in that I-1 district. And again, this is the next piece of legislation, but 2 Tichenor Place is sort of similar. It's an underutilized industrial site, so.
I encouraged Councilman Hotchkiss to put both of these into the same meeting so that we can have a discussion
Okay,
about
yeah.
that whole area all at once with
Gotcha.
the people that are
Yeah.
looking at that area together, rather than having separate conversations
Sure.
that are
Yeah, I didn't know how much I could jump in.
Yeah.
Please do.
well, Please
That's-
do.
yeah.
That's a committee
Meeting
meetings
of the
are a
minds
little,
here, a little looser.
little.
And this
yeah.
is the, just to remind you all, so it doesn't take this out of any review. It takes it just out of a special permit with the planning board. It would still be subject to site plan review for things like parking, access, lighting, landscaping, all of those things. But city council or the planning commission would not have the special permit process.
So just to sort of add to that, if a social service facility is over 4,000 square feet, then it would require planning commission review, site plan review, but not the special use permit if this moves forward. If it's under 4,000 square feet, it would be permitted by right, and it wouldn't go to the planning commission, and it wouldn't have a public hearing. Social services as a land use is pretty broad. There's lots of different types of facilities that fall under that umbrella. And I think that's the main reason that it requires a special use permit is because they can have such different impacts. The planning commission gets a little bit more discretion with special use permits and can review the use itself on its face and determine if it's appropriate or not for that location. Without the special use permit, the planning commission really can only look at like physical aspects of the site. So again, special use permit means it could be allowed in the zoning district, but there's some scrutiny required. If that special use permit goes away, then it means that that use is permitted by right and that use cannot be denied, regardless of what type of social service it is or how the facility is run or, any of those details that are not site plan issues.
Again, this is a very small area that this would apply to. But unfortunately, the planning commission, and you can correct me if you think I'm speaking out of turn, but there were no sets of, we were applying for permission to put in a code blue warming station with 40 beds. And there were no set of conditions under which the planning commission would approve that use. Like they actually said that on the record. There is no set of conditions under which we would approve this use. And I mean, given that fact, there's kind of nowhere to go. I mean, the options for the applicant in that case were either to bring an action against the city, which the ACBC chose not to do, or to try to have the code amended to kind of take the planning commission out of that situation.
The mayor's perspective is that this is something churches should be handling. My conversations with pastors has been that the city of Binghamton has been putting too much on the churches and the church participants, and they're
Some of them are.
some of them are and some of them are. But I'm saying those are kind of the behind the scenes conversations that are happening. Are basically my understanding is no permits are required if it's in a religious
Correct.
facility.
Or sorry,
Yeah, no.
or an
please do.
existing social services facility.
And that, so it's, I just want to make sure that we're clear that it's not accurate that we cannot have warming stations. It's just that currently without going through the permitting process, which has been kind of clear, is not welcoming to having warming stations. The only other route is through churches or zoning change, right? So that's kind of the context for this.
So we're
I don't want to misrepresent it as there's no path with a warming station, but it would fall onto churches.
And honestly, churches are a great source for but ACBC is running the church, at least one church warming station. So there sort of is no better organization to oversee such an activity. And in this building, do you remember how big that building is? It's humongous.
It's really large.
It's a huge building.
15 Charles.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's huge.
that used to be a former industrial.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple, two ways to look at them. Is the zoning level look at this and what is allowed and what is allowed, by right, by permit, and what is the difference, practically speaking, between personal services, whatever those are allowed by right, but social services Why not? So we can have an overnight luxury spa, but we can't have an warming station on cold nights.
And as we was very clear
Is
about,
the impact on the neighborhood different between a personal service establishment or a social service establishment? And then you have the actual impact of that particular building, where there's a couple of dozen people living, when there's been multiple sororities and fraternities living in there over the years. Like, is there actual impact to the neighborhood more from this use than the current use? And then you have ACBC already running offices and street teams and all kinds of stuff out of there now. Like, I know there's a lot of hue and cry from the neighborhood when this happened. But I'm actually, I don't know that practical, overspill will be terribly different than what's there now, possibly better.
Yeah, so just on that point, I don't know that any of the residential occupants of that building have resulted in any significant sort of violations or concerns from the neighborhood.
I used to live there, so I can tell you, there's a long history of parties there, big
Noise
parties,
complaints.
like fire alarms being pulled, like the full
Right,
college life kind of things were happening with.
sure. I mean, we got a lot of turnout at the public hearings for 15 Charles. That was not a concern that was shared by any of the residents of the neighborhood to the north or any of the businesses along Clinton Street. And then as far as the planning commission decisions, the conditions that the members were looking for varied. There was a member that said that there were no conditions that would satisfy him, but there were others that did propose some conditions that the applicant was receptive to, but ultimately they just weren't convinced by the application as a whole. It was presented originally as a warming station, so it's a small sort of minor facility, but through the application process, there was more information about long-term plans for the building. And like Sarah mentioned, it's a really large building. So if you have social services, varying uses that occupy, let's say 100,000 square feet or whatever the building is, and that's a regional social services facility, there are real impacts there that need to be considered. And a lot of the planning commissioners did not feel like that was fleshed out. So that was presented, and then it was sort of scaled back later on, like, let's just focus on the warming station. And I think that sort of, back and forth, I think turned off the planning commissioners, where they thought they needed more information before they said yes to this special use permit.
But the application was only for the warming station. That was what was denied. No other approvals were sought.
But with this change, though, this would go beyond just the warming station, because it would make social
Right.
services by right.
Right.
Correct. And so, like, what this would do is, let's say everybody agrees that ACBC is great, their proposal is great for this facility, and we want it. But the next applicant may be something that the planning commission does not think is a good fit for the neighborhood. Maybe there's more concern from the neighbors, maybe the mayor's office doesn't like it, maybe the councilman for that district doesn't like it. There's still, at that point, there won't be really a lot of leverage for the planning commission to say, no, we won't allow this at this location, you need a more suitable site, or we'll allow this at this location, but you really need to scale back this operational thing or that operational thing. They'll really have to focus really on landscaping, parking, lighting, and construction, if there's any construction involved. So it kind of ties the planning commission's hands to not only to make their own decision, but also to back up what they hear at the public hearing from residents. And a lot of times you do get, NIMBYs at all public hearings for all our boards. But if there are real concerns that are related to the use per se, that are legitimate, they will be limited in their ability to to not allow certain uses. And again, social services is really broad.
So is a different solution to alter the definition of social services or break off some of the more intense things under social services, perhaps?
I mean, that could be
Light
an
social
option.
services and heavy social services.
Or the other
Yeah.
option,
Like, light industrial and heavy industrial.
the other option would be to move the special permit process from the planning commission to the city council.
Or at least put in an appeals process, which is not, which as we found out, we have for COD.
You have her caught, yes. In social services right now, support services for specific populations or the community at large also includes facilities that provide transient housing related to social service programs, includes alcohol or drug rehabilitation, community residential, human service, and methadone facilities.
Would this even be considered housing? Because of roaming? Well.
Because they're overnight, yes. That
Okay.
was a decision that I think you made. Because they were there overnight, it was. It fell within this definition.
It fell under social services, but
Right.
it's a human service agency providing a transient housing.
But their operations they're running out of there already are social service operations. I mean, there's people in and out of the building all day long already.
Which are offices, essentially, that's all they are.
Needs pantry and things out of there too and stuff. People are, I mean, it seems like it's the same. You have
Same people.
the same people. Like I don't.
That's a separate issue, but I mean, that,
And you both have people that live there overnight, and you have people that are in and out, that would be the people that would be warmed at night.
social services is not an approved land use right now in that building.
Right.
I mean, we're I mean,
So that's sort of a separate issue.
I don't think I have any further questions on this right now. Any
But it's,
other-
yeah, I mean, it sounds
Yeah.
like our concrete next steps, discussion, investigation is thinking about a change that creates an appeals process potentially, or breaking off heavy and light, so, trying to create two separate categories.
Don't even consider that.
Yeah, maybe-
I wouldn't consider that at all.
Probably the better, or
Don't even write it down.
easier choice is to do special permit from the
Because
city
you can
council.
have a hybrid of an appeals process and light social services by right. Yeah, Nate really doesn't like it.
I don't like it.
I mean, there
I
is
think
there is just the simple change on the table as well.
Yeah.
Or the do nothing. Also always an option. But so Tito, this is really the only district that, this is really the only area thing that has this district. Yes. Right now. it's not.
Correct, yeah. Hopefully, and this is a coincidence, but hopefully there'll be another I-1 in the city.
So if those are the only two options, then you're essentially looking at two buildings or whatever vacant land is in the Charles Street Park.
Yeah,
That's it. I mean, it's not like you're looking at this across the city. I would submit to you that social services would be appropriate in the Tishner building too. There wouldn't be a reason that it would be inappropriate.
Tell you what's not in the I-1 district is auto junkyard, which is what in fact we have. in a
Have it,
lot of districts.
yes. Yes,
It's a pretty long
we spend a bit of
history.
time in the urban business park area, looking at what's actually there.
sure.
Now, there's a neighbor behind that parking lot. There's been a long.
Oh,
history.
yeah, I'm familiar with, it's been difficult to prosecute.
And there's people
We've
living
tried.
there.
Busted down sheds. Again, I used to actually live in 15 Charles.
I keep hearing more stories about that place, which is really interesting. I remember I saw like a Craigslist ad for an apartment there.
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
But-
The building is actually really nice. I've
It
never
is.
been in it, but it's high ceilings and wide open spaces. It's a nice, it's perfect for ACBC to provide a continuum of of services in one space, not having people sort of having to go all over town to get their services. It's nice.
Similar concept as the
The
vet
veterans,
center.
yeah.
Yes.
One-stop shop for
Yeah.
veterans. Yeah.
Basically a one-stop shop.
Just a note on this RL, changes of the land use or the adoption of changes in the list of land uses in
That's
a
good.
zoning district over 25 acres is a type 1 action under seeker. So this would need the long seeker form, but go through the full review.
And if I understood from the mayor that the process here also, the planning commission would provide a recommendation.
Yeah,
Correct.
it should be referred to the planning commission. I will say that they're probably going to view this as amending the zoning ordinance to accommodate, one property owner, which generally is inappropriate. But that is part of the process, is to refer to the planning commission.
Making a change for whole district, though, I mean, it's a whole zoning classification, that's. Just so happens
For
that it's
all
a small classification.
Do it for all zoning classifications.
Yeah.
Like, permitted by right in every zoning district.
Yeah,
You know,
So
if
those-
that's
That's why
the
we
problem
all
we
live
have,
by it.
then there's a solution for that.
I don't know if the constituents would like that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can also go back and look at the public hearing
Yeah.
and get a flavor for what the
Yeah.
objection was. I know some people maybe were there, but it was a pretty common, we just don't want this. The service is needed, but we just don't want it where we live.
And then we, the recent Salvation Army case, where you have a social service building plopped in the middle of an was it R2?
R3.
R3, probably up there. That was allowed to continue based on a special use permit granted
To a different
20
organization.
years ago, yeah.
Yeah, those use variances, that's state law, they run
Right.
with the land,
Yeah.
so they don't go away. So if it's considered appropriate for social services in 1980, then it's appropriate forever.
But I mean, I guess that kind of fits in with our previous discussion where you were saying like, so hypothetically, everyone's game with, thinks ACBC is gonna do a good job, but then there's concerns about organization Y who wants to move into this area. But when we're talking about the former Catholic Charities, now Salvation Army building, it's like a different organization can just move into the building without any, like, I guess
That's true.
it's like,
And that's kind of my original point, is if you make social services permitted by right, you're making social services permitted by right for all users. Down the line.
But it looks
Judgment
like
call
this-
whether that's a good or bad idea.
Right. And also, if you look at the definition, I would, it kind of looks like they have to be licensed, at least. It's not like I'm gonna be a social services agency tomorrow and open a methadone clinic, for example. It appears, I think this definition, I don't know, that's your call, but it's not like just the social services of Sarah organization that, I think there would have to be a licensed
It
facility.
depends, some are licensed by default, because you can't be sort of like a standalone rehab facility.
Right.
But, if I wanted to open a food pantry or something like that, I don't know what the regulations are for that, but there are conceivably social services that you don't have to be licensed by the state to provide giving away clothing or things like that.
Eating and drinking establishments allowed by right here, certainly have a food pantry.
You can't consume on premises in a food pantry, so.
Oh, they
I'm
do.
just kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
So does that include everything you want on the table for that agenda?
I don't think it concludes anything,
Uh,
but it's a
well, I
good
don't know.
discussion.
At least,
We're
at
kicking
least,
off the
at least
discussion
for
at
the
least.
purposes of this meeting. All right, moving on to the request for legislation 24-86, an ordinance to amend official zoning map to rezone a portion of Clinton Street and Mygat Street. This was submitted by Tito Martinez. Do you want to give us, I mean, we touched on this already, but just
Yeah,
overview?
so the purpose is to rezone a cluster of properties on that east end of Clinton Street to allow mixed-use development. Everything that would be rezoned is currently light and medium industrial, which does not allow residential. Just given the neighborhood of the neighborhood character of Clinton Street, and the fact that we need more housing, we just think it's appropriate to rezone this to allow mixed-use development. And then in addition to that, there are existing residential properties that are not conforming because they were put in an industrial district in 2006 for whatever reason. So this would legalize those in a way, so if a property owner there wanted to make an addition to the property or add a unit, they could legally do that if it was C4. And then, so the majority of the area is going from I2, so that's industrial, to C4, which is neighborhood commercial, which is what most of Clinton Street is. And it allows that type of development, apartments with ground floor commercial, or if it's an existing house, it can remain a house. The 2 Tichenor would be rezoned to I1, and the purpose of that being a different zoning district is that it is an existing industrial facility. We don't want to make industrial not allowing that building. We want that site to be developable. But I1 focuses more on sort of cleaner and lighter industrial uses, and also allows multi-unit dwellings. So if someone wanted to do mixed use there, they could. And I think it allows more commercial uses as well. But in a nutshell, it makes that site more developable while also making the uses that could go in there a better fit for Clinton Street, because that section, again, is not on Clinton Street itself. You don't have a lot of industrial facilities. You have commercial, and then you have residential further north.
So the section of Erie Street that's over here, is that already? This. It's trying to tell from the purple shading. What is
Yeah.
that now?
So
That's
light and
industrial.
medium.
That's light and medium.
So you're not changing that?
No, that's not part of the scope of this.
Okay.
There's a
Why?
bunch of like single.
I'm looking at houses on Erie Street, right?
That wasn't recommended in the comp plan, and it
What
fronts
comp
on the,
Oh, okay.
and it fronts on the railroad, so,
Yeah, but there's houses there. Like, what's the point of restricting these people if we're unrestricting the people on McGatt Street?
I'm not opposed to that, but again, it wasn't recommended in the comprehensive plan, so it just
I
wasn't
don't care.
on our radar.
I'm looking at the street.
Along Clinton Street, the properties that front on the railroad, a lot of them are industrial because they have railroad access. 2 Tichenor Place is different in that it fronts on Clinton Street, so that's why that was picked to be a more compatible use with Clinton Street. The properties south along the railroad, you do have more industrial uses on Clinton Street if you go west, fronting on the railroad. There are some exceptions. Obviously, there's a couple houses there.
Are there any prospects right now that we're like looking at the building? Or is it just purely speculative?
What prompted us looking at the zoning here was a proposed affordable housing development along Clinton Street. When we looked at it and said, why isn't it allowed here? We then went and referred back to the comprehensive plan, looked at what that recommended to be changed. and then looked at sort of what made sense, like the example of McGat Street, where you have a bunch of houses that are zoned industrial, and there's no room for any kind of industrial development there. And then you have the Boys and Girls Club, which shouldn't be industrial either. So yes and no. The review was prompted by a potential development, but then we took a look at the whole area.
First word action council, right?
Correct.
Are they still looking?
Are they looking?
I mean, are they still interested in it?
Yeah,
It's that's 44, right?
the vacant lot.
Yeah. Jerry.
It's kind of the
Jared
same as the
Miller has
last
earmarked,
discussion.
yeah.
These things change by finding something that doesn't work and trying to make it work for whatever is proposed. You know, that's how it works. Thank you, yes. Nobody else cares.
I don't think so, because it's part of this larger rezoning. If I recall correctly, the comp plan calls for that to be sort of production mixed use, which is sort of a lesser industrial thing, so.
So how much, like, how much does this, what kind of percentage of industrial, like, is this reducing our city by, right? Because we have like New Energy New York, hypothetically, things work out well, all the
Right.
municipalities are working together, research is going good, we're getting all these new factories going in relating to batteries. Where are we gonna be able to site any in Binghamton, or?
Yeah, we have a lot of industrial land. The impact of this would be minimal, because again, Titchener would be able to have industrial use. And then the others really wouldn't, in the short term at least. I mean, if the Boys and Girls Club goes away, then that could be an industrial site. But all these others are too small for any kind of industrial user. So I don't think we're
So it
getting
wouldn't
any.
impact them.
No, not any viable industrial land being lost.
What's the difference between like C4 and the I1? The urban business park?
Yeah.
What's like the
So C4 is neighborhood commercial, so you can kind of get an idea of what types of uses that allows, sort of smaller scale commercial uses. Delis, cafes, offices, lawyers' offices, things like that. And it also allows residential use on the upper stories and in the rear of the properties. I1 allows more industrial uses, so you could have sort of clean industrial in the I1, whereas you couldn't in the C4. Some uses are light industry, transportation service, industrial cannabis business, hospital, sort of larger scale things that wouldn't be allowed in C4.
Neighborhood commercial districts, animal care, automatic teller machines, community center daycare, dwelling, 1 to 3 units, no more than 4 bedrooms per unit, eating and drinking, garden, community or neighborhood, general retail, greenhouse/nursery, medical office, personal service, recreation, indoor, retail, food sales, studio, art gallery, townhouses 2 or 3 attached, vehicle sales, rental.
And then there's
The
the special
neighborhood
permit.
commercial district.
I get the picture. But thank you. I don't know if I have any other questions. Is everybody else here?
Well,
Any
I
comments?
mean, I would have asked you to take a look at this block of Erie Street that's hanging out here. That seems to have mostly houses on it.
As to rezone it to what?
To-
C4
well,
or-
whichever you think.
Or residential.
I mean, it seems weird to leave it I2 that what it is right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, nobody's gonna buy up these 1, 2, 3, 4 parcels. Make their own iron smelting facility. It seems, it's dead, I think Erie dead ends.
Right.
So I would say it makes sense to,
If you
I don't
change
know.
it to maybe three parking, ancillary to.
I believe that's allowed in the I2 currently,
I too.
but
Light
No.
intermediate, we've got permitted by right, animal care, automatic teller machine, eating and drinking establishment, general retail, greenhouse / nursery, industry light,
probably
medical
needs a
office,
special use
office,
permit, probably.
under the special use, all
Yeah.
right, we've got
Yeah,
adult entertainment, cannabis, industrial, cannabis retail, crematory, parking, there it is. Parking area ancillary object to, and parking commercial subject to.
we could take a look at, maybe the parcels fronting on Titchener. I think that cluster further west, I don't think those are residential, but I think the ones fronting on Titchener Place, maybe we could take a look. The planning commission reviewed this 2 meetings ago and recommended approval. So we'll get a memo to the clerk stating that. I don't know if I included that. I don't think I-
Anything else with that?
It's good.
Yeah, thanks for,
And you'll follow up with us about if they're gonna modify relating to those houses.
Yeah, we could take a look at that. And I could send something to Sarah tomorrow. Would this go to the next work session, or how does the scheduling usually work?
If it gets signed out, which means if, say, the 2 is in, no, so what I'm gonna say, or 4 of any city council members, then it can go straight to the business meeting.
Oh, that's good.
If it doesn't get signed out and people feel like there needs to be more questions answered or follow-up, then I can put it to work session to keep it moving,
Okay,
but it
Gotcha.
doesn't necessarily need to go to, assuming it's,
gotcha.
any city council member can watch the video that we're recording right now, and people can sign it out. It's been introduced.
Got it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
so,
So,
motion to adjourn.
motion,
second,
All right, all in favor?
aye. I don't know if I can motion as ex officio, actually.
well, then I'll.
It was gonna get the same result.
You're
Motion
gonna
second.
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 Motioned by Kevin, seconded by.
Thank you.
I was like, wait a second, I'm ex officio.
Well, we can have,
Vote.
yeah. It was on the agenda last week, Councilman Kavanaugh moved a little bit over, so now it's gonna be on the agenda for next. So we'll be ready for the application. We're talking about I think they're talking about basements, because that's the only one outstanding. I'm pretty sure.
Application of what? No, I think we're talking different.
Are you talking about the basement?
No, she's
Oh.
talking about a planning commission.
My bad, that was the only, my bad, that was the only thing that I know we have outstanding together, so.
Are you talking about this?
Did you press end?
Yeah, they want.
On the right?